Hello and shalom, brothers and sisters in Messiah Yeshua. Welcome back. I'm Jeremy, and today we're talking about the return. So those of you that haven't been following the series, we've been doing a 7-part series all about the resurrection and culminating it with what the book of Revelation says. And this is going to be part 5 of the 7 videos in the series called the Resurrection Revelations, because I believe that Revelation isn't just many different events happening, but I see more time and time again, and that all of these different things that we see in Revelation, the birth, the catching away, the 2 witnesses, and they're all the same. They're all a different picture of the same thing, and that's the resurrection. And so we've been going through this study and looking and comparing all these things with many different scriptures, biblical and extra biblical, as a second and third witness. So with that, we started off, the first video was about the resurrection, just plain and simple from the very beginning. We started with the 2 deaths that we talked about in Genesis, and then Yeshua confirms 2 deaths, and then also the 2 resurrections at the end. The first resurrection for Yeshua's body, and then the second resurrection for everybody else at the end of the millennial reign. The second video was all about the raiment, putting how Adam and Eve became naked in the beginning. They lost their immortality, and what all of this is about is putting that immortality back on so that we can enter back into the Garden of Eden, aka also New Jerusalem, where the city's built. And we can't do that while we're in mortal bodies, because God is the God of the living, not of the dead, and He created everything to be eternal, not to be temporary life. And to Him, that's like a dirty garment, and we can't come into His house wearing that. All right, and then the restoration, we looked at the spirit of life, how it gave life at the very beginning, and they lost that Ruach HaKodesh, and looking for the Ruach HaKodesh again. We've been talking about that and looking at how when Peter talks about being born again and receiving the Ruach HaKodesh, that's a down payment. That's not the born again like we saw in the birth video that we did last time, going hand in hand. So restoration was with the Ezekiel 37 and the 2 witnesses. We paralleled those things and saw many of the parallels showing that they are both the same event, the 2 witnesses and the 2 olive trees, and also the 2 sticks of Ezekiel, which the word there is tree. And then again, the birth, we looked at Isaiah 66 and all the different passages that talk about a birth, and we connected that in Revelation to the Revelation 12 when the child is born and caught up. And then there was the remnant that was left, because God always leaves a remnant. So we've been looking at this from that point of view, that there will be a resurrection, and those that are resurrected will be able to ascend up into the heavens with Yeshua, while there is a remnant of those that remain that still are believers in Yeshua, but they go through the Great Tribulation, the 144,000, however, are sealed that no harm comes to them. But we've been seeing that in every one of these videos that we've been doing, whether it's when the 2 witnesses rise up, it says the remnant give glory. When the child is caught up, the remnant flees. We also saw when they put on the new garment, they were in heaven with their eternal garment, but we see below the 144,000, or a remnant, are sealed with the Spirit, I believe the double portion, that no harm comes to them. And we also saw that with Elijah and Elijah, after the 3.5 years of his ministry, or holding back the rain and so forth. When the rain came down, after that he ascended, and he passed the mantle on to Elisha, who then, with the double portion of the Spirit now, goes and sees the ascension, but these 42 children are mocking him for not ascending, and they say, "Go up, Baldy, ascend up." and these two beasts come out and devour the 42 children. Like we see in the book of Revelation, the beast that rises out of the sea and the beast that rises out of the earth, they will be devouring the children during the 42 months. And so we see that the Father always leaves a remnant, and Yeshua's remnant, they also remain during this time. But before that, we see that the dead Messiah rise first, and that's what we've been looking at. And so today we're going to look at the return, because many people have said a statement that has always kind of troubled me for a long time. They say that they want to be left behind, and it comes from one passage, I believe, and we're going to go over that today. And do we really want to make that statement? Do we want to be left behind? Because a lot of believers think that when Yeshua returns, he's going to come and take and gather those that are going to be burned in the fire. And we're going to look at that today. Is that what's really being said? Because we know that there's two things that's coming, the salvation and the wrath. And that's what we have, that picture that's showing here. Just throughout the whole Bible, we've seen that with Egypt, with pretty much any time the wrath comes, there's also always salvation, right? With the flood, Noah was lifted up above the flood. He was saved through it. With Lot, he came out of the city. He went up into the mountains. But the wrath also came on Sodom and Gomorrah. We see that the children of Israel, when they came out of Israel, they went out of the city and into the wilderness up to the mountain. And so we're going to see that again when Yeshua returns. There is salvation and wrath. And so which one gets to go where? And we're going to look at that today. All right, and then the next one we'll talk about the rapture and the trumpet. I was going to try to put the trumpet in this video, but it just was too long. So I've shortened this one down. So hopefully this won't be as long as they have been. Anyway, and then the last one will be about the harvest and Shavuot. We'll finish that one up on hopefully this Saturday, right before Shavuot. All right, so let's get started with the return. So right off the bat, let's go to 1 Thessalonians 5:8, and we're going to see the wrath and the salvation. It says, "But let us who are of the day," right, we're children of the day, "be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for the helmet and hope of salvation. For God has not appointed us to wrath, but to obtain salvation by the Lord Yeshua the Messiah." And so we've seen this, and I'll show it again for people that might not have seen it, but from the Targums, we see that when the adversary came on the night of Passover, the children of Israel were saved eating the Passover, or with the Passover, on their doors while wrath was coming on Egypt. And it says that the right hand brought salvation, but the other hand brought wrath. And it goes on and it says, "Who died for us, that whether we wake or sleep, we should live together with him. Therefore comfort yourselves together and edify one another, even also as you do." So we need to edify each other, that we aren't appointed unto wrath. And so we're going to see that as we get into the Great Tribulation and so forth, that is when the wrath comes. And there's a difference between when Jacob's trouble comes. We also see that when it talks about that, it says that we will be saved out of it, even Jacob's trouble. All right, moving on. I figured we'd go right to some of the extra biblical stuff so we can see what some of the early believers thought about what's going to take place at the end. And so this is Origen. He's before all these. I usually don't quote anybody after the Council of Nicaea, because I believe that after that it kind of got a little bit hazy. But for the most part, everybody pretty much agrees on most things up until this point. Origen does start changing a little bit in some things, but some of the other ones like Marcion and that, I don't use those guys. Anyway, book 1. It says, "When he has put under his feet the opposing power," right? We see that even in Psalms and the rest of the Bible, it says Come sit at my right hand until I make your enemy your footstool, right? And the earth is his footstool. And so when the enemy is cast to the earth, anyway, we're going to see that. We've talked about it before from Ezekiel and other places where he's going to be cast to the earth. But we're going to see that they also say this. So again, it says when he puts him under when he has put under his feet the opposing power, that's Hasatan, and is alone in the presence of his father, then he, speaking of Yeshua, is Jacob and Israel. And thus we are made light by him, since he is the light of the world. So we are made Jacob, since he is called Jacob, and Israel, since he is called Israel. Right? So he is Israel because he is the head of Israel. He gave Jacob the name of Israel, and we too, though we're not of the physical seed, are born into it. We are grafted in, and we become fellow citizens, and so we are to Israel. All right, Eusebius of Caesarea says this. It says, "For with all his might the adversary fell on us, giving us a foretaste of his unbridled activity at his future coming." So they understood that there were two comings that's going to take place. And I believe it's at the same time, and we'll see that. They don't say when they are, but you can see here the adversary is coming, and he will be unbridled. This is Eusebius that's saying this, at his future coming, his unbridled activity at his future coming. And so that's what we also see in Revelation, that Hasatan is cast down, and he has great wrath because he knows that his time is short. And so that agrees with what Eusebius writes, that he's coming and his time is short. Again, he says this, he says, "He endeavored in every manner to practice and to exercise his servants against the servants of God, not only shutting us out of the houses and baths and markets, but forbidding any of us to be seen in any place whatever." And so he's also pointing us to what we see, that no man may buy or sell except for he that has the mark, and so forth. But he's kind of pointing to that as, look, we were also having a taste of that back then. But when he comes, it's going to be unbridled. All right, and we talked about this just now from the Targums in Exodus 12:40. It's speaking of the times that God was revealed, or the Father, or Yeshua was revealed to mankind, really. It says, 4 nights are there written in the book of memorials before the Lord of the world. Nights, the first when he was revealed in creating the world, the second when he was revealed to Abraham, the third when he was revealed in Mitzrayim, and this is where it says his hand killing all the firstborn of Mitzrayim, or Egypt, and his right hand saving the firstborn of Israel. So here we see 2 things happening at once, and 2 entities being there. The left hand, or the hand that was killing and bringing the wrath, and the right hand that is bringing the salvation. And it says the fourth will be yet to be revealed to liberate the people of the house of Israel from among the nations. So that's when he's going to liberate them, and keep that in mind, from among the nations. He is doing that. He is going to liberate them from the nations. So keep that in mind when we go forward. And it goes on, and all these nights are called nights to be observed, for so explained Moses, and said, therefore it is to be observed on account of the liberation which is from the Lord, to lead forth the people of the sons of Israel from the land of Mitzrayim. This is that night of preservation from the destroying angel. So who was the left hand that was killing, or the hand, it doesn't say left, but it does call Yeshua the right hand. But the other hand is the destroying angel, the one that brings wrath. For all the sons of Israel who were in Mitzrayim, and of redemption of their generations from their captivity. So they were redeemed from their captivity, and that's a picture of the end, right? When there is the hand of salvation, but then there is also the destroyer that's coming. But in the end, the only difference is he's unbridled. And we'll talk about why I think that is here in a moment. I think every time when you have the right hand of salvation leading the children out, like Lot out of Sodom and Gomorrah, remember, the destroying angels were not allowed to do anything until they were gone. But I think in the very end, it starts in that destroying before his people have gotten out. And we see that when Yeshua says, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, flee. And many of the other things it talks about, because the great tribulation is coming. All right. So Eusebius of Caesarea, again, it says this in 5:16. But the grace of God led the conflict against him and delivered the weak, and set them as firm pillars, able through patience to endure all the wrath of the evil one. And they joined battle with undergoing all kinds of shame and injury, and regarding their great sufferings as little, they hastened to Messiah, manifesting truly that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed to us afterwards. Romans 8:18. So even then, right, they were, and we went over some of these scriptures before from Maccabees, the children being tortured and everything, from the wrath from him, but they still remained faithful. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, it says this in 1QM. It says, like the fire of his wrath against the idols of Egypt, and when they have departed from the slain in order to enter the camp, they shall sing the hymn of return. In the morning they shall wash their clothes and cleanse themselves. And so we talked about this many times. We've looked at many scriptures so far when it talks about at the resurrection they ascend up and they're singing. And so this is talking about when they left the camp. Remember when they got on the other side, they sang when they left Egypt and they went through the waters, and then on the other side they were singing the song of Moses. And so here it says it's also referring to the end, that they like they departed from the slain in order to enter the camp. We have to depart to enter the eternal camp. And it says they all sang the hymn of return. And that's what all of this is about, is for us trying to return back to the garden, return back to being able to eat from the tree of life, return back to immortality that God originally intended for us, because he knew better than we did, but we didn't trust him. And it says they shall wash their clothes and cleanse themselves. And that's what, when we looked over the glorious garments, we saw over and over again, it's the picture of changing the garment from the wool to the linen, and from the corruptible to the incorruptible, from the mortal to the immortality. And so we see that again there. All right, let's go to Psalms 18 real quick and just run through this as we before we get into the big portion of that. But Psalms 18:8, it says this: there went up a smoke out of his nostrils, and fire out of his mouth devoured coals like they were kindled by it. He bowed the heavens also and came down, and darkness was under his feet. So we see that the Bible tells us when, and we just saw when the enemy is put under his feet. Well, the enemy is the authority over darkness, and here it says that he bowed the heavens and came down, and darkness was under his feet. And he rode upon a cherub. So if he's upon it, it's under him. And we've seen from Ezekiel that Hasatan was an anointed cherub that covered. And again, we see until iniquity was found, and so forth. And it says, and he did fly. Yes, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. And he made darkness his secret place, his pavilion round about him. They were dark waters and thick clouds of the skies. We know that Yeshua is returning in the clouds. It says, "And the brightness that was before him was thick clouds, and passed hailstones and coals of fire. Yet also thundered in the heavens, and the highest gave his voice. Hailstones and coals of fire. Yes, he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he shot out lightnings and discomfited them." And so many times we see it from Revelation and the day of the Lord, these are the same things that are happening. But we see here that the darkness is below his feet. And then if you go and read through Song of Songs, I'm not going to put it in here, but it's also alluded to that the darkness is coming, but behind that darkness is the light waiting for coming at the same time. And so we see the wrath and the salvation coming. In 18:15 it says, "Then the channels of the waters were seen, and the foundations of the world were discovered. At your rebuke, O Yahweh, at the blast of your breath." And we know that there's this last trumpet that's coming. And it says, "At the breath of thy nostrils, he sent from above and took me. He drew me out of many waters." And so we just saw that, right? That he's going to come and take them out of the nations. Well, here it's saying also, he took me, lambano, to take. And we're going to see that again. He delivered me from my strong enemy. Not just enemies, but his strong enemy. And from them which hated me. For they were too strong for me. They prevented me in the day of my calamity, but Yahweh was my stay. So again, this is a picture of somebody is being saved from this strong enemy, this darkness that's coming. It says, "He brought me forth also into a large place. He delivered me because he delighted in me. Yahweh rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands has he recompensed me. For I have kept the ways of Yahweh and have not wickedly departed from my God." And so this is things that we've seen many a times, right? That this is the time of the reward and also the time of the judgment of the ungodly. But according to the cleanness, and how are we cleaned? Through the blood of Yeshua and by his word. It says, "For all his judgments before me, and I did not put away his statutes from me." Right? We keep his commandments. "I was also upright before him, and I kept myself from mine iniquity." All right, so we see there the two judgments again, coming at the same time, one on the heel of the other. And in Matthew 3:12 it says this, because this is where a lot of people take this scripture and they claim that you don't want to be part of the taking. It says, "Whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather his wheat into the garner, but he will burn the chaff with unquenchable fire." So we see here salvation and judgment. But it's the next verse that really has tripped a lot of people up. It says, "Let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of harvest I will say to the reapers, gather you together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn." So I've heard many teachings that say, well, the first that are gathered are the ones that are taken away to be burned. And so you don't want to be part of that. And so all the verses that say that, those that are in the field will be taken, they assume that it's this event of the tares that are being taken. But I'm going to submit to you that's incorrect. And we're going to see that the tares, how they're gathered, they are gathered against Jerusalem. And they're gathered out of all nations. It says all nations will he gather against Jerusalem. And so that is the event that takes place first. That is how he first gathers the tares into bundles to be burned. But those that are taken up, the one that's in the field, the one that's in the bed, that is the taking that you want to be part of, and we will see that. It says in Zechariah 14:1, "Behold, the day of Yahweh comes, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of you. For I will" what? gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. This is him gathering the tares. And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city shall go forth into captivity. This is why Yeshua is warning his disciples. When you see the abomination of desolation, get out. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, get out. He says, flee. He says, because great tribulation is coming. And we see it happening here from Zechariah 14, verse 2. The city will be taken, the women ravished, and half of the city shall go into captivity, and the remnant, the residue of the people, shall not be cut off from the city. We saw that as well with the remnant. They give glory when the two witnesses rise. We see the remnant, they flee in the wilderness after the child is caught up. We also see the 144,000. It says no harm can come to them. They're sealed with the Ruach HaKodesh. They're given the double portion, just like Elisha was given the double portion. It says, then shall Yahweh go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of battle. So here it says that Yahweh is going to do the fighting. Well, who did the fighting in Egypt and who did the saving? If you read the scriptures, it says that Yahweh he did both. Well, if he has one hand that's doing the wrath, and Yeshua, the right hand, is doing salvation. And this next verse that we're going to look at here in a moment is very difficult for some to hear, and we'll get there in a minute. But for now, let's talk about this gathering. So Joel 3:31, it says, for behold, in those days and at that time, that's usually a reference to the end, the day of the Lord, right before, at the great tribulation. It says, shall I bring again the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem? He's done that, right? He is, Isaiah 48:1, he has brought Jerusalem back, he's brought Judah back, but not in truth or righteousness, right? They don't believe Yeshua is the Messiah. They're not keeping the Torah. And Isaiah 48:1 says they call themselves after the holy city. Anyway, it says, I will also gather all nations, and I will bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. They've parted his land. That's what's going to take place, right? But again, this is the gathering of the tares into bundles to be burned. And it says, and they have cast lots for my people, and have given a boy for a harlot, and sold a girl for wine, that they might drink. And we're seeing, just like we saw some of the early church fathers when they said that they were receiving some of this, we're seeing early parts of this with what's happening now, with what's going on there in the land. These things are happening and starting now. I'm not saying that's the fulfillment of it, but we see these things also taking place. All right, in Isaiah 66:18, it says, for I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come. And what's so important about this is Yeshua gives a very important message when he says to his enemies, he says, you shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory, right? Or many scriptures we see that. And so what does it say here in Isaiah 66? He's gathering all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. Who are they going to see? They're going to see Yeshua. But I also believe they're going to see the son of perdition. All right. In Luke 21:20 it says, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is near. So he is gathering all nations, the tares, to be burned. We see in Joel 3:4, it says, yes, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will you render me a recompense? And if you recompense me swiftly and speedily, will I return your recompense upon your own head? I didn't put Psalm 83 in here, but we see the 10 nations that are nations that all surround Israel today, the land, and they're all Arab nations. And so a lot of people believe that those are the 10 horns of the beast. I don't believe that's the case. I believe that the beast is a different entity that rises out of the west, out of the sea. But these 10 nations and these ones here are also mentioned in the 10 nations of Psalm 83. These are the ones when he's gathering all nations around to burn. And so that's what I believe is happening there. The beast and the false prophet, they are governmental systems that are thrown into the lake of fire when Yeshua returns, because his government will rule over his people, not a beast out of the east that rules over the Ephraim and the lost sheep of the house of Israel, or not a beast that rules over Judah, our brethren, when Yeshua returns. Yeshua will take those two nations and they will become one in his hand. And that those governmental systems that rule over his people that are doing a poor job are cast out. The governmental system. Okay, so that's how I see that, is those two beasts are the systems that rule over his people, the north and the south, and the king of the north, the king of the south, and then also the all of the nations that surround the land. They are going to be gathered together to be burned in the fire. They are the gathering of the tares. And so the thing is that we know from history that the Father has always used these other nations and stuff to get Judah and Israel to repent and to turn. But when he does use them, the judgment and also the punishment to those nations that came upon and did what they did, they also receive a punishment. All right, moving forward. So judgment on Babylon in the day of the Lord. In Isaiah 13:14 it says, "And it shall be as the chaste roe and as the sheep that no man taketh up, they shall every man turn to his own people and flee every one into his own land. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled and their wives ravished." That's what we just saw in Zechariah 14. But who was it to? It was Jerusalem. And here it's Babylon, because I believe that Mystery Babylon is a picture of modern day Jerusalem. And then also it says, this is speaking about after the day of the Lord. It says, "They ravished the women in Zion and the maids in the cities of Judah." And so that's sadly what took place, because Yeshua warns his disciples, when you see these things, get out, because great tribulation is coming. And so many people are telling, are not taking the heed or the call that it is coming, that Yeshua wants them to turn, to get out, because the judgment is coming. It goes on, "The crown is fallen from their head. Woe unto us, we have sinned, because of the mountain of Zion, which is desolate. The foxes walk upon it." So again, what we see here in Zechariah 14. And then it goes on here in Zechariah 14:4. So remember, we just saw that Yahweh went to fight against those nations as he fought in the day of battle, right? So he gathered all the nations, but Jerusalem was taken. But now what's going to happen? Now he's going to fight all those nations, and the woman is fleeing into the wilderness. Or those that are in Judea are fleeing, but he's going to go fight against those nations that came up against Jerusalem. And how's he going to do that? Well, there's somebody that's coming that's giving their power unto the beast. And so we see here it says, "And his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives." And so many people have taught that this is Yeshua that's coming, because it says that it's Yahweh, it's the Yod He Vav He, it's the Lord that's fighting. And then the very next verse says, "And his feet shall stand in the day of battle." Well, who fought against Sodom and Gomorrah? Who fought against Egypt, it says that Yahweh did it. But when we read in the Targums and so forth, we see that Yeshua, the right hand, was the one bringing the salvation, and the other hand was bringing the wrath. And so when we see that Satan is cast down to the earth in Revelation, we see him cast to the earth in Ezekiel, we see him cast down in other places. We see it says when he's taken out of the way. We see when it says when the abomination of desolation stands where he ought not. All these things, it says, flee, get out. And I believe that is this event right here. And we're going to see that. It says, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem, and on the east of the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east, towards the west, in a very great valley. And half of the mountain shall remove toward the north, and the other half of it towards the south. So there's a great earthquake when he comes. But also what's happening? Well, we see here, like I said, in Samuel 24 verse 1, it says, and again, the anger of Yahweh was kindled against Israel, and he moved David against them to say, go number Israel and Judah. That same event, but when it's written in 1 Chronicles 21:1, it doesn't say the anger of Yahweh, it says, and Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David. Well, who was it? Was it the anger of Yahweh, or was it Satan? Well, it was Yahweh, but it was Satan, the other hand, that was doing this, right? Just as he brings wrath, but he can only do as much as he is allowed to. There is a verse somewhere that talks about the angels that destroy more than the destroying angels took more than they were supposed to, and they will be judged for it. And so he has a bridle. He can't do more than he is allowed. But at the time of the Great Tribulation, he is unbridled. And so in Luke 10:18 it says, and he said unto them, I behold Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Well, that's interesting, because in Matthew 24:27 it says, for as lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So the coming of Satan is with lightning, the coming of the Son of Man is with lightning. Well, we see in Zechariah 9:14 it says, and Yahweh shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as lightning. So here we see Yahweh, we see Yeshua, and we see Satan coming as lightning. And so if you understand that that Yahweh uses, Yeshua is the visible image of our invisible Father, right? He is the goodness of God. He is the glory of God, because God is good. God is love. He is the visible image of what love is, and love is the Father. But if the visible image of this other hand was to appear, the wrath, what might that look like? And so I believe that that's what mankind is going to see. They're literally going to see it. It goes on in Zechariah 9:14. It says, and the Lord Yahweh shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with whirlwinds of the south. So there is this trumpet that's going through, and it's Yahweh that's bringing this whirlwind. But who brings the wrath? We see it's this unbridled adversary. In Ezekiel 28:17 it says, when my heart was lifted up because of my beauty, you have corrupted your wisdom by reason of your brightness, and I will cast you to the ground. I will lay you before kings, and they may behold you. In Matthew 24:30 it says, and then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the coming of the Son of Man in the clouds of the heaven with power and great glory. Yeshua comes in the clouds. Who is coming to the ground? It is the adversary. And it says, behold, he comes with the clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Even so, amen. And so, again, we see, if we look at this in a big picture, It says, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem, on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof towards the east and towards the west, a very great valley. And half of the mountain shall remove towards the north, and half of it towards the south. Now it's the next verse that always had me wondering, because I was on board with this, that this was Yeshua as well, that he's standing on the Mount of Olives. Because we see him later standing on Mount Zion with the 144,000, but that's the only other reference throughout the whole Bible that talks about his coming and him standing somewhere. But the Mount of Olives, I always thought was Yeshua. But the next verse goes on and says this in verse 5, and you shall flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azel. Yes, you shall flee like you fled from before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judah. And Yahweh your God shall come, and all the saints with thee. Why are you fleeing from this person that's standing on the Mount of Olives? If that's Yeshua, why are we fleeing from him? That always bothered me until and I believe that the Father has been opening my mind up to that this is that son of perdition, that when you see him stand where he ought not to, right? And it says here, and his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives. All right, let's continue. It says, and I will make Jerusalem heaps and a den of dragons, temim, right? We know that word temim is the word that's used for Leviathan, the great temim, and it's a den of temim. It says, and I will make the cities of Judah desolate, without an inhabitant. All right, so here we are, Luke 21:20. It says, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is near. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. So we see Yeshua is warning his disciples, when you see Jerusalem surrounded with armies, like we saw, he's going to gather all nations against Jerusalem. He's going to gather the tares in bundles. But Yeshua says, when you see that, flee. Why? Because we know that he's going to gather them first, and something is coming when that takes place. He says, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, get out, and let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto. Why? For these are the days of vengeance. This is the great tribulation coming, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Well, if we look at this same thing that he says from Matthew's gospel, he's going to give us a little bit more information, because we're fleeing from Jerusalem. We just saw someone from standing on the Mount of Olives also, that Zechariah tells us that we're fleeing. And then it says this in Matthew 24, when you therefore shall see the what? Abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. So here we see, he says, when you see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. And so people have always said, well, this is the temple. But remember, we looked before at, there's 3 holy places on the earth according to the book of Jubilees. It is Mount Zion, it is the Holy of Holies, which is the Garden of Eden, and it is Mount Sinai. So when he stands on the Mount of Olives, he's standing in the Holy Land. We also know that's holy because we see that when Joshua and the children of Israel crossed over the Jordan in that general area, he says, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground. It says, but when he saw many of the Sadducees and Pharisees come to his baptism, right, the same area where John was baptizing is about the area where the children of Israel crossed over into the promised land. And he says to them a very interesting thing. And why did John the Baptist say this when he did to the Pharisees? He says, but when he saw many of the Pharisees and Sadducees come to his baptism, he said unto them, O generation of vipers, who's warned you to flee from the wrath to come. Was he foreseeing what was going to happen in Jerusalem? And as they're coming out of Jerusalem into the wilderness where he is he kind of giving us a prophecy of what's happening? Because like Yeshua says, when you see the abomination of desolation, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, because the adversary is coming, the son of perdition, you're going to see him stand there. And also, you're going to see the tares being gathered to be burned. But Jerusalem will be taken. So who warned you to flee from the wrath to come? All right. In Luke 3:6 it says, "And all flesh shall see the salvation of God. Then said he to the multitude that came forth to be baptized of him, again, O generation of vipers, who has warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" So here we're given just another hint. At that time, did all flesh see the salvation of God? No, but yet we're told that when Yeshua returns, that every eye shall see him, even those that pierced him. They're going to see him coming. In Jeremiah 6:1 it says, "Strengthen yourselves, you children of" who? Benjamin. That's the other tribe of Judah, of the two tribes, "to flee out of the midst of Jerusalem, and sound an alarm with the trumpet." Right? That's the trumpet, the last trumpet. When the two witnesses rise, the remnant give glory. And then also we see when the birth takes place and the child is caught up, the remnant flee to the wilderness. It says, "And set up a signal over Beth Karma, and for evil threatens from the north." Which north? The heavenly north or the land of the north? Could be both. It says, "And a great destruction is coming, and your pride, O daughter of Zion, shall be taken away." I really wish that the land of Israel today would just turn back to the Father, instead of asking all of these, trying to make alliances and everything else. When the Father gives you the land, it's yours. You need to get rid of all those that are there that are troubling you. And it says that because of their pride, right, they now say to all the time, never again, instead of turning back to the Father. Anyway, I'm getting off that. Let's keep moving. So in Revelation 12:5, we see the same thing, right? After the two witnesses are resurrected, they're taken up. The next event, we see the birth and the war in heaven. And those two witnesses, I believe, are the two houses, are also the child that's being caught up. But then at the same time, after that, there's 42 months. There's 1,260 days. There's 3.5 years that Hasatan is unbridled. And it says, "And she brought forth a man-child, who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. And the woman," or the remnant, "fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days," the 3.5 years. So the woman, which I believe is the remnant, it goes on to say the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have faith in the Messiah. So there's still a remnant that is going to go through this great tribulation. Now Jeremiah 51:6, right? Earlier we just saw them saying, "Flee from Jerusalem." Now in the same way, it says in Jeremiah 51:6, "Flee out of the midst of Babylon, and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of Yahweh's vengeance, and he will render unto her a recompense." So who's getting cut off? It's Jerusalem. In Zechariah 14, it's Jerusalem. Who are they fleeing from? Who does Yeshua tell them to flee from? Jerusalem. Over and over. But we're told here in Jeremiah 51:6 that it is Babylon. Why? Because I believe that Mystery Babylon is modern day Jerusalem. All right. So in 2 Peter, I use this verse all the time. It says, "Whereby the world that then was being overflowed with water perished, but the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men." So the fire is in store for the perdition of ungodly men and those that gather themselves to war against Jerusalem. Whether you believe that Jerusalem is in the right or the wrong, you will be also judged and end up in that. So don't be the one that goes up against them. All right. We'll finish out here in just a minute with the coming. So as we saw, right, the gathering, one's gathered to Jerusalem to be burned, but the other one, it says he's going to take them. So we're going to see that from here. John 14:2. In my Father's house are many mansions. We saw that in the previous videos over and over. If not, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you, that where if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come, erhomai, again, and receive or take you, paralabano, to myself, that where I am, where is he? He's in New Jerusalem. He's in the heavenly Garden of Eden. It says, where I am, you may be also. And where I go, you know, and the way you know. Right? The way to getting where? Back to eternity, back into the garden, back to New Jerusalem, back to where we can eat of the tree of life freely. That's where Yeshua is. That's where we want to go. That's where we were kicked out in the very beginning, and that's what everything in this life is about, is us getting back to the Father and trusting him. In John 14:28 it says, you have heard how I said to you, I go away and come again, erhomai, to you. If you loved me, you would rejoice because I said I go to the Father, for my Father is greater than I. And in Luke 12:36 it says, and you yourselves like unto men that wait for the Lord when he will return from the wedding, that when he erhomai and knock, and they may open unto him immediately. So I'm putting this here because we see there is the erhomai when he's coming, but then there's also erhomai after the wedding. And we will hit on him coming at the start of the tribulation, and I believe he's coming again at the end of the tribulation. But that's after the wedding. And we can see that there is two erhomais. And so are they interchangeable? I know a lot of people think that there will be two comings, and one is the erhomai and one is the paralambana, or I can't think of the word off. It's here in just next one, I think. No, I didn't put it in here yet. It's the parousia, sorry. It's late in the day here. But anyway, the two comings, parousia and erhomai. But I'm not necessarily convinced that each one is used for one in the other, but I think that they're just used interchangeably because each writer prefers one or the other, and we'll see that here in a second. Luke 10:35, and on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them, and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever you spend more, when I come again, I will repay you. I think that word, I can't remember what that one was. I forgot to put that in there. But I think it's a different, no, that's at the top there, epen erhomai. So it's a little bit different, but it is coming again, all in one word. And then the parousia. So Matthew uses parousia. He says 24:38, for as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the parousia, the coming of the Son of Man, be. So that flood, like we've talked about before, there's a flood. It's a war of armies coming. And so in the end time, Hasatan gives his authority to the beast, and they're fleeing from what's happening there. And so Yeshua comes in the cloud for the dead, that they're able to now rise, and the remnant are able to flee. In Matthew 24:40, speaking about Noah, it says, then shall 2 be in the field, one shall be paralambano, and the other left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, and one shall be paralambano, and the other left. So again, some people see this as after the Great Tribulation, but the erhomai is before the Great Tribulation, and it could be. But we have to acknowledge that there are so many scriptures that show that it is before the Great Tribulation that Yeshua returns and takes those to himself. As we've been going through all these scriptures, we see, but then we see the 144,000 that are also standing on Mount Zion later. So the child is caught up, the two witnesses are caught up, and there is a remnant that remain. All right. And Luke 17:30, it says, "Even thus shall it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed." Right? It goes on to say, "I tell you, in that night there shall be two in one bed. The one shall be taken, paralambano, and the other left. Two shall be grinding together, and the one shall be taken, and the other left. Two shall be in the field, and the one shall be taken, and the other left." So people will say that you don't want to be part of these taken, or they will say, "I don't want to be taken," because they have said that, oh, they're the ones that are going to be taken to be burned up. I completely disagree. I believe these are the ones that are taken to go be with him. It's the same words that Yeshua uses when he says, "I will come again and paralambano, take you to myself." But are the tares taken to be burned? No, they are gathered. It's a completely different word, and we see they're gathered together at Jerusalem. All right, 2 Corinthians 5:5, it says this, "He who has prepared us for the very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee, so we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him." That is our goal, is to be with Yeshua. And Yeshua is back in the eternal dwelling with the Father, and that's where we want to get back to. But so many people have got their eyes on this world and this life, but they should be back on what God originally had intended for us, and that's the eternal life, being able to dwell in his garden, in his presence, with his Son, experiencing only the good that the Father intended for us in the first place. All right, 2 Corinthians 5:10. "We must all appear before the judgment seat of Messiah, so that each one of us may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil." Just like Yeshua said in Matthew 5, if you teach the Torah and do it, you'll be called great in the kingdom. If you don't do it and don't teach it, you'll be called least in the kingdom. But we got to keep loving one another and trying to build each other up. And we are all growing. We've all started at a very low area and come out of the world, and we are growing in our Father's understanding of him and his love and his word and his Son. Hebrews 9:27, "And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that the judgment, so Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save, when the salvation comes, those who eagerly wait for him." So we're waiting for him to save us, to take us. That's what is happening. And remember, when he comes again, what happens? Salvation. And so we saw that with both in Revelation 7, the multitude in white robes. It says they cried with a loud voice, saying, "Salvation to him who sits on the throne." And what else do we see? The 24 elders and the 4 beasts, they fall down before the throne. At this time that the great multitude are up in heaven given their white robes. And then right after that, we'll see the 144,000 that are sealed, so no harm comes to them. So before that happens, these are up in heaven, and they are sealed before the Great Tribulation. In Revelation 11:15, the 2 witnesses ascend up, and then we see that the remnant give glory. And in the very next verses, it says, "And the 7th angel sounded, and there was a great voices in heaven, just like we saw loud voices in heaven, saying, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever. Salvation comes. And what happens in the next verse? The 24 elders fall down before him on their faces in worship. Same event that's happening with the white robes. But what's happening? There's a remnant afterward in both. Revelation 12:10, the man-child is caught up, the dragons cast down, the remnant flee. And that remnant are they that have the faith and keep the commandments. And what's the verse say in 12:10? After all this, it says, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now is come salvation. We just saw that. Salvation came when they had the white robes, and they were in heaven singing. But then there was the 144,000 still on the earth. And then also the two witnesses, when they rose up, the kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of the Lord. What happens here? There's loud voices in heaven saying, now has come salvation and the kingdom of our God and of his Messiah. And who? The accuser of our brethren is cast down. So at the same time that the child is caught up, the dragons cast down to the earth, the remnant have to flee. And what happens next? Well, we see also in Revelation 19:1, the fall of Babylon and the marriage take place. And the verses right after that say, and after these things I heard great voices in heaven and much people in heaven saying, hallelujah, salvation and the glory and honor and the power of our Lord God. And then right after that it says, and the 24 elders and the 4 beasts fell down and worshipped before the throne. Exact same thing. All 4 events are the exact same thing, but told in a different way. Matthew 24:4. And Yeshua answered and said to them, take heed that no man deceives you, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and shall deceive many. So let's go through this real quick, and then we'll finish it all up. Matthew 24. Let's see what he is actually saying about the Great Tribulation. It says, and you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. Right? For nation shall rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. So there's going to be wars all over, but we see when does the end come? Yeshua's already told us before, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by all nations. Now, is that every nation in the world? I don't think so. I think it's all the nations that surround them, almost like we saw in the 6-Day War in 1967. I believe it's going to be something like that, but it could be all nations of the world. It says there will be famines and earthquakes in various places, and all these are but the beginning of birth pains, and they will deliver you up to tribulation. Keep this in mind, because the Bible doesn't just use words flippantly. Words mean things. And Yeshua and the disciples are very good at word placement and choosing their words. So here we're finding out that the end is not yet, but there is tribulation. Tribulation, not great tribulation. And he goes on, and put you to death. So they're going to put him to death, but Yeshua is calling that just tribulation, right? It says, then they will deliver you up to tribulation and put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake, right? But remember, precious in the sight is the death of his saints. In 24:10 it continues. It says, and then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many. So it's about false prophets and brothers, I believe, hating one another and becoming offended. It's funny to me that the book of Jubilees actually prophesied that the Torah would become, that the people would start keeping the Torah again in the last days. And right after that event is when it says that the people will start living to the 1,000-year lifespan again. That's during the millennial reign. But it prophesied about this big movement of people returning back to the Torah, and that's happening today. But the thing is there are so many brothers that are doing that are causing strife and hating one another and offending one another because we don't say the name that they say they say it, or we don't believe the earth is the way that they believe it is, or the alphabet, or the calendar. And we are forgetting the very thing that Yeshua prayed for us before he left this earth, was to unite in love. And we're not doing it. He says, and many false prophets shall arise and shall deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, and the love of many shall wax cold. But he that shall endure to the end, the same shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom, which kingdom? Yeshua's eternal kingdom, New Jerusalem, shall be preached in all the world for a witness to all nations, and then shall the end come. He's going to continue. He says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, I believe that's Zechariah 14. Whoso reads, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. Let them which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Don't go back in. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe to them that are with child, and them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in the winter, nor on the Sabbath day, because for then shall be great tribulation. So now, the wars, the rumors of wars, and the killing of the saints was tribulation. But when you see the abomination of desolation stand where he ought not to be, that's when the great tribulation is coming. Why? Because Hasatan, we saw, is coming unbridled. It says, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. Why? Because Hasatan has been bridled this whole time until this time, and then he will be bound after his 3.5 years. Some believe it's cut short, and hopefully and prayerfully that will be, but he will then be bound. And so never again will this happen. Never. Because at the end of the 1,000-year reign, he's released and he's thrown in. He goes to make war to deceive the nations again, but he's bound again, thrown into the lake of fire. It says, and except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. So is it shortened to 3.5 years, or is it shortened to a year or less a year? Again, there's great teachings out there on that. But some of us will have to go through it. It says, but for the elect's sake, right? For the elect's sake, not those that were taken, the dead Messiah that rose up, the child, the two witnesses, those from every tribe, tongue, and nation that are given their white robes, their garments, while this is going on. Those that alive and remain, they are the remnant of the four corners of the harvest that go through and still are preaching the gospel. It says those days should be shortened. And then it goes on, it says, and if any man shall say to you, lo, here is the Messiah, or there, believe it not. For there shall arise false messiahs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that, if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I told you before. It says, therefore, if they shall say to you, behold, he is in the desert, go not out. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines into the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered. So all this deception, and I could be wrong, but the Bible says that Hasatan masquerades as an angel of light. And so if he's cast to the earth, he's not coming looking like this gruesome being. He's looking like an angel of light. And whom might the believers and others think he is? Not the remnant that keep the commandments and have faith in him. They're going to know this isn't who it is. But the rest of the world, who might they think that that is, that comes and stands on Mount Zion? Anyway, it says, therefore, if they... moving on. Now, this is, again, where people get tripped up, because we've read about the Great Tribulation for a moment, right? And when you see the abomination of desolation, he says, flee, because it's going to be Great Tribulation. So now this next verse, they assume that this is talking about after the Great Tribulation. But again, words mean things. Yeshua says, immediately after the Great Tribulation of those days, No, that's not what it says. I recant that statement. It says, immediately after the tribulation of those days. What was the tribulation of those days? The killing of his saints. What do we see in Jerusalem? The two witnesses are killed. That's tribulation. They're going through tribulation. They are killed. And then what happens? They resurrect up. They go up to heaven. It says, now has come salvation. This is the same event as the child being born and caught up to heaven, and the remnant fleeing. Why are they fleeing? They're fleeing from the adversary who is cast down. Why are those in Zechariah 14 fleeing from the one that stands? Because he just got cast down. But it later says that it comes with his saints. Well, it's because they are the wrath and the salvation. And it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. And the stars, a third of his angels are cast down with him. Anyway, it says, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. This is war in heaven. This is war in heaven. All right, so sorry about that. It says, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. So what's happening? This is the war in heaven when Hasatan is getting cast down. Daniel, in Daniel, and it says Michael will stand up when those that sleep in the dust of the earth shall arise. Revelation 12, when Michael stands up. So Daniel's saying when Michael stands up, those that sleep in the dust of the earth will arise. We see that. The child's being caught up. And Hasatan is being cast down. There's war in heaven. It says, and then what? Shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. He's coming where? Right behind Hasatan as he's trying to take that child. Yeshua is coming right with him as lightning. But Yeshua is coming in the clouds, calling them up as Hasatan is being cast to the earth. It says, and shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. And we saw that, right? That the remnant gave glory, but the world is mourning, and they're scared for what's coming. And it says, they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Not to the earth. Yeshua doesn't come to the earth. He comes in the clouds. And finish it up here. It says, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, like we saw in those other verses, right? The trumpet sounds, and he gathers them from the nations. At the very beginning we saw that, right? From Psalms 18 and so forth. And it says, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So here you have people also being gathered, but there is still a remnant that remain. All right. And finishing this up in 1 Corinthians 15:51, behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye, right? Lightning. At the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable. The two witnesses, the child that's caught up, those from every tribe, tongue, and nation that are given their new garment. It says, we shall be changed. For this incorruptible must put on incorruption, and this mortal must put on immortality. In 1 Thessalonians 4:16, for the Lord himself will descend from heaven with the cry of the command and the voice of the archangel and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Messiah will rise first. Then we who are alive and remain will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we will always be with the Lord. Now, this other event that may be possible when it says that we who are alive and remain will be caught up together, that might be something that takes during the 3.5 years. I don't know. But for one thing is, the Bible is very clear that this event happens. There's a remnant that remain, but there are those that ascend. All right, so I hope that has blessed you. We will go into that trumpet in the next video and talk much in depth about the trumpet. I have some cool things to show you guys about that. I'm very excited about it. and I will try not to do the video as long on that one. Hopefully we can get it out tomorrow. Anyway, I hope this has blessed you, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave a message and all that stuff. Anyway, Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you peace. Shalom.